Colorado Territory, 1885. Willow Keating stared at the unruly classroom of 12 students before her, each face a portrait of mischief as they whispered and giggled among themselves. At 22, she hadn't expected to find herself teaching in a one-room schoolhouse in Elkhorn Springs, but life had a way of rearranging one's plans. "Children," she called, her soft voice barely carrying over their chatter. She cleared her throat, attempting to summon more authority. "Children, please take your seats." Only half the class noticed her plea. Little Emma Jenkins continued showing off her new hair ribbon while the Thompson twins tossed a crumpled paper ball between them. The schoolhouse doors suddenly swung open with such force that the hinges protested loudly. Every head turned as sunlight silhouetted an enormous figure in the doorway. The children froze, their mischief forgotten. "Miss Keating," the man said, removing his hat as he ducked to enter the schoolhouse. "Apologies for the interruption." Willow's breath caught in her throat. She recognized him immediately as Preston Ryder, one of the cowboys from the Sage Creek Ranch. Though she'd only been in Elkhorn Springs for 2 weeks, she'd heard whispers about the gentle giant who stood well over 6 feet tall with shoulders that seemed capable of carrying the weight of the world. At perhaps 25 years of age, Preston Ryder was unexpectedly youthful for someone with such a commanding presence. His chestnut hair fell in waves just above his collar, and despite his imposing size, there was a gentleness in his blue eyes that reminded Willow of clear mountain lakes. A light stubble covered his strong jaw, but he was otherwise well-kept compared to most ranch hands she'd encountered. "Mr. Ryder," she managed, conscious of how her cornflower blue dress suddenly felt too tight around her collar. "What brings you to our schoolhouse today?" He held up a small wooden box. "Found something I thought might interest your students, ma'am." The children edged closer, curiosity overcoming their initial intimidation. Even 8-year-old James Miller, the most rambunctious of her pupils, stood silently attentive. "May I?" Preston asked, gesturing toward her desk. Willow nodded, smoothing back a loose strand of her honey-blonde hair that had escaped its pins. She was acutely aware of 12 pairs of eyes darting between her and the towering cowboy who now carefully placed the wooden box on her desk. "Came across this little fellow while mending fences," Preston explained as he gently opened the box to reveal a tiny, featherless bird. "Fallen from its nest, I reckon. Thought your students might like to learn about caring for wildlife." The children gasped and pushed forward, their earlier misbehavior forgotten. In that moment, as Preston's large hands demonstrated how to delicately handle the fragile creature, something shifted in Willow's classroom. For the first time since her arrival, she had their complete attention. "Now," Preston said, his deep voice softened as he addressed the children. "Who can tell me what this little one might need to survive?" Hands shot up throughout the room. Willow stood transfixed, watching the transformation of her classroom and wondering about the man who had accomplished in minutes what she had struggled with for weeks. More troublingly, she wondered why her heart had begun racing the moment he'd walked through the door. What she didn't notice was the way Preston's eyes kept finding their way back to her, or how his hands trembled slightly when their fingers accidentally brushed as she moved closer to examine the orphaned bird. Nor could she have guessed the real reason behind his visit, or that it would be the first of many that would change both their lives forever. "He's coming again today," announced 10-year-old Mary Sullivan as she bounced through the schoolhouse door. Willow looked up from the arithmetic lessons she was preparing. "Who's coming, Mary?" "Mr. Ryder, of course." The girl's eyes sparkled with excitement. "My pa saw him at the general store buying books." "Books, Miss Keating?" He said Mr. Ryder asked specifically what kinds of books a schoolteacher might like. Heat flooded Willow's cheeks. It had been 3 weeks since Preston's first visit with the orphaned bird, which they'd named Petey. The cowboy had returned every few days, ostensibly to check on Petey's progress and to teach the children about local wildlife. Each visit left Willow more flustered than the last. "Mary Sullivan, I am certain Mr. Ryder has better things to do than visit our little schoolhouse today," Willow said, though her heart skipped at the possibility. "But he promised to show us how to make rope," protested James Miller, who had entered behind Mary. "He said cowboys need to know how to make good rope, and so do farmers, and anyone who might get stuck in the mountains." Willow smiled despite herself. Preston had a way of turning the most mundane skills into adventures that captivated her students. Since his visits began, attendance had improved remarkably, as had behavior. By noon, All 12 students were seated attentively, completing their history lessons with unusual focus. When the door opened, Willow didn't need to look up to know who had arrived. The children's sudden straightening and eager expressions told her everything. "Afternoon, Miss Keating," Preston said, hat already in hand. Today he wore a clean blue shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders and matched his eyes. "Hope I'm not disturbing your lessons." "Not at all, Mr. Ryder." Willow gestured to the waiting children. "As you can see, your pupils are eager for today's instruction." Something in her choice of words made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "My pupils, is it? And here I thought you were the teacher in these parts." The children giggled, and Willow felt the familiar warmth spread across her cheeks. "You seem to have quite the talent for holding their attention," she admitted. "Only because they're hoping I'll let them visit the new foals at the ranch," he replied with a wink to the class that sent them into another fit of giggles. As promised, Preston demonstrated rope-making, his large hands working with surprising dexterity as he explained each step. Willow found herself mesmerized by the contrast between his strength and gentleness. How the same hands that could break a wild horse now patiently guided 8-year-old Emma's fingers through the proper technique. "Miss Keating, you ought to try too," called out Timothy Walsh, the blacksmith's son. Before she could protest, Preston was beside her desk, offering a length of hemp. "It's easier shown than explained," he said softly, his voice pitched for her alone. Willow hesitantly took the hemp, all too aware of the children's watchful eyes and Preston's proximity as he guided her through the motions. His hands enveloped hers completely, and though they were calloused from hard work, his touch was light as a feather. "There's a rhythm to it," he murmured near her ear, causing a pleasant shiver to trace her spine. "Like dancing." "I'm afraid I'm not much of a dancer either, Mr. Ryder," she confessed. His smile was warm. "Perhaps that's something we could remedy someday." The implication hung between them, heavy with possibility. Willow was saved from responding by little Emma, who tugged at Preston's sleeve. "Mr. Ryder, when can we see the foals?" "You promised." Preston straightened, breaking the spell. "That I did, Miss Emma. Actually, I've spoken with your teacher about a field trip to the ranch this Saturday, if she's agreeable." All eyes turned expectantly to Willow, who blinked in surprise. "This is the first I'm hearing of it, Mr. Ryder." His expression turned sheepish. "I meant to ask properly before mentioning it, but these young uns have a way of getting ahead of things." He glanced at the eager faces surrounding them. "The ranch owner, Mr. Edwards, has given permission. We thought the children might benefit from seeing how a working ranch operates. Their parents would be welcome too, of course." Willow considered the proposal. A field trip would be educational, and the children were clearly enthusiastic. Yet she couldn't help wondering if there was another motive behind Preston's invitation, one that made her pulse quicken. "I'll need to speak with the parents," she said carefully. "Of course," Preston replied, reaching into his vest pocket. "I've taken the liberty of writing it all down. The time, what the children should bring, what they'll learn." He handed her a folded piece of paper. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Willow was certain the contact lingered longer than necessary. When she unfolded the note later, after the children had gone home, she discovered not only the details of the proposed field trip, but also a personal message scrawled at the bottom. "The wildflowers are blooming on the North Ridge. They reminded me of you." Willow pressed the note to her chest, her heart racing as she wondered what exactly she was getting herself into with Preston Ryder, and whether she had the courage to find out. The Sage Creek Ranch sprawled across 1,000 acres of rolling hills and fertile valleys, its white-painted buildings gleaming in the morning sun. As the wagon carrying Willow and her students approached, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of anticipation. "There he is," shouted James, pointing toward the corral where a tall figure worked with a chestnut mare. Preston looked up at their arrival, a smile breaking across his face as he secured the horse and strode toward them. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance. His shirt was crisp, his dark trousers clean, and his usually unruly hair had been tamed with pomade. "Welcome to Sage Creek," he called, helping the children down from the wagon before offering his hand to Willow. His warm palm against hers sent a jolt through her body that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. "Thank you for inviting us, Mr. Ryder," she said, conscious of the parents who had accompanied them. "Preston, please," he replied quietly. "At least when we're not in the schoolhouse." "Then you must call me Willow," she returned, surprising herself with her boldness. The day unfolded like a carefully orchestrated dance. Preston had planned demonstrations at various stations around the ranch: horseshoeing with the blacksmith, butter churning with the cook, calf roping with two of the younger hands. The children rotated between activities, their faces alight with excitement. Midday found Willow seated on a blanket beneath a cottonwood tree, supervising lunch while Preston helped the ranch hands organize the afternoon's activities. Mrs. Jenkins, mother to young Emma, settled beside her. "That cowboy certainly has a way with the children," she observed, watching as Preston hoisted little Timothy onto his shoulders to give him a better view of the distant cattle herd. "He does," Willow agreed, unable to keep the admiration from her voice. Mrs. Jenkins gave her a knowing look. "And it seems he has a way with their teacher as well." Willow felt her cheeks warm. "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, I think you do," the older woman replied with a gentle smile. "The way he looks at you when you're not watching. It's the same way my Henry looked at me when we were courting." She patted Willow's hand. "It's not a bad thing, dear. A good man is hard to find in these parts, especially one who's both gentle and strong." Before Willow could formulate a response, Preston approached their blanket, 2 plates of food in hand. "Thought you ladies might be hungry," he said, offering them the plates. "Cook's outdone himself today." Mrs. Jenkins accepted her plate with a knowing smile. "How thoughtful of you, Mr. Ryder. I should check on Emma. She's looking a bit flushed in this heat." She rose, giving Willow a meaningful glance before departing. Preston settled in the spot she'd vacated, close enough that Willow could detect the faint scent of leather and soap that clung to him. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked. "Very much," she replied truthfully. "You've created a wonderful experience for the children. They'll be talking about this for weeks." "And their teacher?" His blue eyes searched hers. "What will she be talking about in the weeks to come?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. I'm sure I'll be commenting on the educational value of such practical demonstrations," she managed, her academic response at odds with the emotions churning within her. A shadow of disappointment crossed his face. "Of course, the educational value." He looked down at his hands, then back to her with renewed determination. "Willow, there's something I'd like to show you after the children leave, something just for the teacher, not the students." The weight of his words hung between them, loaded with possibilities. Across the ranch yard, Willow could see the children engaged in their activities, the parents chatting amicably with ranch hands. No one was paying them any attention in their shaded corner. "What sort of something?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Those wildflowers I mentioned." His gaze never left hers. "They're even more beautiful up close." The invitation was clear, as was the meaning behind it. A proper lady would decline, would insist on returning with the children and their parents. Yet something about Preston Ryder made Willow want to be just a little less proper than she'd always been. "I would like that," she said finally, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he must hear it. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I'll saddle 2 horses before everyone leaves." As he stood to rejoin the children, Willow couldn't help wondering what other unexpected turns her life might take in Elkhorn Springs, and whether the gentle giant who had so captivated her students was about to capture her heart as well. What she didn't notice was the dark figure watching from the ranch house window, or the frown that crossed the observer's face as Preston helped her to her feet. Someone wasn't pleased with the budding connection between the cowboy and the schoolteacher, someone who had plans of their own that didn't include their happiness. The north ridge of Sage Creek Ranch offered a panoramic view of the valley below, but Preston's eyes weren't on the landscape. He watched Willow instead, transfixed by the way the late afternoon sunlight turned her honey-blonde hair to gold as she knelt among the wildflowers. "You were right," she said, fingering the delicate blue petals of a columbine. "They're beautiful up close." "That's not why I brought you here," Preston admitted, gathering his courage as he joined her among the blossoms. Willow looked up, her green eyes questioning. No. He plucked a columbine and gently tucked it behind her ear. "I brought you here because it's the only place on the ranch where we might have a private conversation, without 12 pairs of young ears listening to every word." A smile touched her lips. "And what is it you wanted to say that's not for young ears?" "That I've been finding excuses to visit your schoolhouse for weeks now, and it has precious little to do with teaching children about wildlife or rope making." His voice was low, sincere. "Though I do enjoy that part too." Willow's breath caught. "Why then?" Because from the moment I saw you at church your first Sunday in town, I haven't been able to get you out of my mind." The words tumbled out, as if once started, they couldn't be contained. "But you seem so reserved, so proper. I figured a schoolteacher like you wouldn't give a second glance to a ranch hand like me. So you decided to win me over through my students?" There was amusement in her voice now, but also something warmer. Preston ducked his head, suddenly boyish despite his imposing frame. "I figured if they liked me, maybe you'd at least notice me. Give me a chance to prove I'm more than just muscle and dirt. I noticed you long before you started visiting my classroom, Preston Ryder," Willow confessed, her cheeks coloring beautifully. "But a new schoolteacher must be careful about her reputation. I couldn't exactly come calling at the bunkhouse." Hope surged through him. "And now that you've gotten to know me a bit." Willow's gaze dropped to the wildflowers, her fingers tracing their petals. "Now I find myself looking forward to your visits more than is probably proper. The children ask daily when you'll return. They've never been so eager to learn." "And their teacher?" Preston asked softly, reaching out to tilt her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Is she eager too?" The moment hung between them, fragile as a soap bubble. Then Willow did something that surprised them both. She leaned forward and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief, innocent, but it sent Preston's world spinning. When she pulled back, her eyes were wide with her own boldness. "Does that answer your question?" she whispered. Preston could only nod, momentarily robbed of speech. When he found his voice again, it was rough with emotion. "I'd like to court you properly, Willow Keating. With your permission." "I'd like that very much," she replied, her smile radiant as the setting sun. They rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, both aware that something significant had shifted between them. As they approached the main house, however, a figure stepped out onto the porch. Walter Edwards, the ranch owner, his expression thunderous. "Ryder," he called. "A word, if you please." Preston exchanged a concerned glance with Willow before dismounting and helping her down from her horse. "Wait here," he murmured, then strode toward his employer. Willow couldn't hear their exchange, but she could see the tension in Preston's shoulders as Edwards spoke, jabbing a finger toward her, then toward the road leading to town. Preston's responses were measured, respectful, but firm, his stance widening slightly as if bracing against a storm. When he returned to her, his expression was troubled. "Mr. Edwards has concerns about my attentions toward you." "What sort of concerns?" Willow asked, apprehension coiling in her stomach. "He believes I'm distracting you from your duties to the town's children," Preston explained carefully, "and that I'm forgetting my place as his employee." "That's ridiculous," Willow protested. "The children have never been more engaged in their studies." Preston's smile was tinged with sadness. "I know that, but there's more to it than he's saying." He glanced back at the ranch house, where Edwards still watched from the porch. "He's threatened to dismiss me if I continue seeing you outside of your schoolroom." Willow's hand flew to her mouth. "He can't do that, can he?" "He can. It's his ranch." Preston took her hands in his. "But I need you to know something, Willow. I've been saving to buy my own piece of land. It's not much yet, but in another year or two." "You'd risk your position here? For me?" she asked, stunned by the implication. "We barely know each other." "Sometimes a man knows what's worth fighting for," he said simply. "I'm not asking for promises from you, only for the chance to keep seeing you." As Willow looked up into his earnest face, she realized with sudden clarity that Preston Ryder had indeed won her heart. Through her students at first, but now directly, through his own quiet strength and genuine kindness. "I'm worth fighting for?" she asked softly. "That and more," he assured her, bringing her hands to his lips. Neither of them noticed the curtain falling back into place at the ranch house window, nor the silent figure who had been watching their exchange with growing displeasure. Someone else had plans for Elkhorn Springs' new schoolteacher, plans that a love-struck cowboy was threatening to derail. The following Monday, Willow arrived at the schoolhouse to find an elegant carriage parked outside. A man in an expensive suit stood on the steps, consulting a pocket watch with impatience. "Miss Keating?" he inquired as she approached. "Walter Edwards, owner of Sage Creek Ranch. I don't believe we were properly introduced during your visit." "Mr. Edwards," Willow acknowledged with a polite nod, though wariness crept through her. "What brings you to our schoolhouse this morning?" "A matter concerning the education of our community's children," he replied smoothly, gesturing toward the door. Might we speak inside? Conscious of her duty as a teacher to maintain cordial relationships with the town's prominent citizens, Willow unlocked the schoolhouse. Edwards followed her inside, removing his hat to reveal steel-gray hair and calculating eyes that assessed her classroom with thinly veiled disdain. "I'll be direct, Miss Keating," he said as she arranged herself behind her desk. "I've come to express my concern over the amount of time one of my employees has been spending here, ostensibly educating your students." Willow's back stiffened. "Mr. Ryder has been an invaluable resource. The children have learned. Yes, I'm sure they've learned all manner of trivial ranch skills," Edwards interrupted with a dismissive wave. "But at what cost to their proper education? And to your reputation?" "My reputation?" Willow echoed, heat rising in her cheeks. Edwards leaned forward, his voice dropping. "A young, unmarried schoolteacher must be above reproach, Miss Keating. Surely your teaching college impressed that upon you." "I assure you, Mr. Edwards, nothing improper has occurred in this classroom," she replied, struggling to maintain her composure. "Perhaps not in the classroom," he conceded with a knowing look. "But your private expedition with Ryder after the ranch visit has already sparked talk in town." Willow's heart sank. She'd been so careful about her conduct, always mindful of her position as a role model for her students. The idea that people were gossiping about her innocent ride with Preston was mortifying. "The school board takes a keen interest in the moral character of its teachers," Edwards continued, examining his manicured nails. "As its chairman, I would hate to see your promising career cut short by an indiscretion." The threat was unmistakable. Willow's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them in her lap. "Are you suggesting I should discourage Mr. Ryder from visiting the school?" "I'm suggesting, Miss Keating, that your continued employment depends on maintaining appropriate boundaries." Edwards smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps you're unaware that Ryder has a certain history with young women in positions similar to yours." "History," Willow repeated, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. "The previous schoolteacher left rather abruptly last term," Edwards said, examining a globe on her desk. "After a brief entanglement with Ryder. She was most distressed to discover he had been courting the milliner's daughter simultaneously." Willow struggled to reconcile this information with the Preston she knew, the gentle, honorable man who had spoken so earnestly of his feelings. "I find that difficult to believe." "As is your prerogative," Edwards replied with a shrug. "But as someone concerned with both your welfare and the education of our children, I felt it my duty to inform you." He placed his hat back on his head. "Good day, Miss Keating. I trust you'll make the appropriate decision." After he left, Willow sat motionless at her desk, Edwards' words echoing in her mind. Could Preston have misled her? Was his interest in her simply part of a pattern, a game he played with every new young woman in town? The children began arriving shortly after, their cheerful chatter a stark contrast to the turmoil in her heart. As she mechanically led them through their lessons, a part of her watched the door, half hoping and half dreading that Preston might appear as he had so often in recent weeks. But the door remained closed, and as the day wore on, Willow found herself wondering if Edwards had spoken to Preston as well, if he had been warned away from her as she had from him. The answer came at day's end, in the form of a folded note delivered by young Timothy Walsh. "Mr. Ryder asked me to give you this," the boy said, his expression serious. "He said it's important." Willow waited until the children had gone before unfolding the paper with trembling fingers. "Willow, Edwards has forbidden me from coming to the school. Says he'll dismiss me if I so much as set foot on the property. I need to speak with you, tonight if possible. Meet me at Miller's Creek Bridge at sunset if you're willing. What I told you on the ridge was the truth. Don't let Edwards make you believe otherwise." Preston. Willow pressed the note to her chest, conflict raging within her. The prudent choice would be to ignore his request, to protect her position and reputation. Yet something about Edward's visit had felt wrong, calculated, manipulative. And Preston's note rang with sincerity. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Willow made her decision. She would hear Preston's side of the story. She owed him, and herself, that much at least. What she couldn't know was that someone had watched Timothy deliver the note, had seen her reaction as she read it. Someone who was already making plans to ensure that the meeting at Miller's Creek Bridge would never take place. Miller's Creek Bridge stood silhouetted against the sunset sky, its wooden planks stretching across the rushing water below. Willow gathered her shawl more tightly around her shoulders as she approached, searching for Preston's tall figure in the gathering twilight. "You came." His voice behind her made her start. Preston emerged from the shadow of a large cottonwood, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I almost didn't," she admitted, maintaining a careful distance between them. "Mr. Edwards paid me a visit this morning." Preston's jaw tightened. "I figured as much. What did he tell you?" "That you had an involvement with the previous schoolteacher," Willow said, watching his face closely, "and that you were courting another woman at the same time." To her surprise, Preston nodded grimly. "I thought he might say something like that. It's his favorite story." "Then it's not true?" Hope flickered within her. "There was no previous schoolteacher," Preston explained, taking a step closer. "Not for 3 years at least. And I've never courted 2 women at once in my life." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Edwards has been spinning that tale about me since I refused to court his niece when she visited last summer." Willow's brow furrowed. His niece, Charlotte Edwards, came out from Boston with her sights set on finding a Western husband. Preston's mouth twisted wryly. "Edwards decided I'd be suitable, despite being just a ranch hand. Said he'd make me foreman if I married her." "And you refused," Willow guessed. Preston nodded. "Couldn't marry a woman I didn't love, no matter what position it might get me. Charlotte went back east, and Edwards has had it in for me ever since." He closed the distance between them, his blue eyes intent on hers. "I've never given him cause to dismiss me. I work harder than any man on that ranch, but he's been looking for an excuse. And now I'm that excuse," Willow said softly. "It seems that way." Preston reached for her hand, his touch tentative. "Willow, I meant what I said on the ridge. I care for you, more than I probably should after such a short acquaintance. But if being with me puts your position at risk—" "He threatened my job as well," she admitted. "Said the school board, which he chairs, takes an interest in the moral character of its teachers." Anger flashed across Preston's face. "That man wields too much power in this town. What are we going to do?" Willow asked, realizing even as she spoke that she'd already made her choice. There was a "we" now, despite Edward's threats. Preston's expression softened as he registered her words. "I've been thinking about that." He led her to a fallen log beside the creek, where they sat side by side in the deepening dusk. "I mentioned I've been saving for my own land." Willow nodded, remembering their conversation on the ridge. "What I didn't tell you is how close I am to having enough," he continued, a new excitement entering his voice. "There's a parcel for sale just north of town, 100 acres with good water and decent grazing. The owner's asking $500. "That's a substantial sum," Willow observed. "I've got 430 saved," Preston said proudly. "Been putting away most of my wages for 3 years now. Another few months and I'd have the full amount. But Edwards might dismiss you before then," Willow finished for him. "Exactly." Preston took both her hands in his. "There's another option, though. The bank would loan me the difference if I had something to secure it against." "What do you have in mind?" Willow asked, though something in his expression made her heart beat faster. Preston took a deep breath. "The schoolteacher's cottage. If we were married, your position comes with housing. We could live there while I built a proper home on the new land." Willow stared at him, momentarily speechless. "Are you proposing to me?" "Doing a poor job of it, apparently," he said with a self-deprecating smile. Then, to her astonishment, he slid from the log to one knee before her. "Willow Keating, I know we haven't known each other long, but I'm certain of what I feel for you. You're the most kind-hearted, intelligent woman I've ever met. And if you do me the honor of becoming my wife, I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of you." Tears pricked at Willow's eyes. "Preston, this is so sudden. We've barely begun courting." "I know," he acknowledged. "And if you need time, I understand. But Edwards is forcing our hand. If we marry, he loses his leverage over both of us. You'd still have your position. Married teachers are permitted now. And I'd be my own boss, answerable to no one but myself and the bank." It was a practical solution, Willow had to admit. Yet she hesitated, knowing that marriage was about far more than practicality. "What about love?" she whispered. Preston's gaze never wavered. "I already love you, Willow. I think I started falling the first day I saw you trying so hard to control that classroom of wild children." He smiled at the memory. If you don't love me yet, I understand. But I believe you could in time. I think perhaps I already do, Willow confessed, surprising herself with the truth of it. But marriage is such a serious step. A twig snapped in the darkness behind them, and Preston was instantly alert, rising to his feet and positioning himself protectively in front of Willow. "Who's there?" he called sharply. Silence answered him, broken only by the rush of the creek and the distant hoot of an owl. After a tense moment, Preston relaxed slightly. "Probably just a deer," he said, though his eyes continued scanning the tree line. "But perhaps we should continue this conversation elsewhere." Willow nodded, suddenly conscious of how improper their meeting might appear to an observer. "Walk me back to town." As they moved away from the bridge, Preston's hand found hers, strong and reassuring. "You don't have to answer now," he told her softly. "But will you think about it?" Willow squeezed his hand. "I will. I promise." Neither of them saw the figure that emerged from the shadows after they'd gone, nor heard the muttered curse as it followed their path toward town, keeping just out of sight in the gathering darkness. 3 days passed without word from Preston, days in which Willow alternated between hope and despair as she considered his proposal. Marriage was not a step to be taken lightly, especially to a man she'd known for such a short time. Yet her heart recognized something in Preston Ryder that it trusted implicitly. On the 4th day, as Willow was dismissing her students for lunch, a commotion outside drew her attention. Through the schoolhouse window, she could see a crowd gathering in the street, voices raised in alarm. "Children, stay inside," she instructed, moving quickly to the door. The town's physician, Dr. Harper, hurried past, his medical bag clutched in his hand. "Make way," he called to the onlookers. "Let me through." Willow's heart clenched with a nameless dread. "Doctor," she called. "What's happened?" Dr. Harper paused briefly. "Accident at Sage Creek Ranch. One of the hands was trampled during a stampede." He continued on without elaborating, but Willow didn't need to hear more. "James," she called to her oldest student, "watch the others." "I need to." She stopped, remembering her responsibility to her pupils. She couldn't abandon them, no matter the fear gripping her heart. As if sensing her dilemma, Mrs. Jenkins appeared at her side. "Go," the woman said quietly. "I'll stay with the children. My Emma says it's that nice Mr. Ryder who's hurt." Willow's blood turned to ice. "How badly?" "I don't know, dear. But you should go to him." Without further hesitation, Willow gathered her skirts and ran toward the doctor's office, propriety forgotten in her fear for Preston. The crowd parted for her, whispers following in her wake about the schoolteacher's unseemly haste. She arrived just as 4 ranch hands carried a stretcher into the doctor's building. The glimpse she caught of the figure upon it made her gasp. Preston lay unnaturally still, his face deathly pale beneath a mask of blood and dirt. "Let me through," she demanded, pushing past the men at the door. "I need to see him." Inside, Dr. Harper was already cutting away Preston's torn shirt, revealing ugly hoof-shaped bruises across his chest and a deep gash along his side. "Miss Keating," the doctor acknowledged without pausing in his work. "Unless you're family, I must ask you to wait outside." Willow hesitated, then straightened her spine. "I'm to be his wife. Please, let me stay." The doctor raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "Very well. Make yourself useful. There's clean water in that basin. Bring it here." For the next hour, Willow assisted as Dr. Harper cleaned, stitched, and bandaged Preston's injuries. Though unconscious, Preston occasionally moaned in pain, each sound piercing Willow's heart like a physical blow. "Will he recover?" she asked finally, as the doctor wrapped the last bandage around Preston's chest. "If infection doesn't set in," Dr. Harper replied, washing blood from his hands. 3 broken ribs, that nasty gash, and a concussion from where his head hit the ground. He's lucky to be alive." "How did it happen?" Willow asked, gently brushing Preston's hair back from his forehead. "According to the men who brought him in, someone spooked the cattle while they were being moved between pastures. Stampede caught everyone by surprise." The doctor gave her a considering look. "They said Ryder pushed a younger hand out of the way, took the brunt of the stampede himself." Tears welled in Willow's eyes. It was exactly the sort of selfless act she'd come to expect from Preston. "Someone," she repeated, focusing on the doctor's earlier words. "Not something." Dr. Harper shrugged. "That's what they said. Strange business. Cattle don't typically stampede without cause." A cold suspicion formed in Willow's mind, remembering the figure that had followed them from the bridge, Edward's threats, the timing of the accident just as Preston was close to achieving independence. But she kept these thoughts to herself, instead asking, "May I stay with him?" The doctor hesitated, clearly weighing propriety against medical necessity. As his fiancée, "I suppose it would be permissible," he said finally. "He shouldn't be moved for at least a day, and someone should monitor his condition through the night." Willow nodded gratefully, settling into a chair beside Preston's bed as Dr. Harper prepared to leave for another call. "Miss Keating," the doctor said at the door, "I wasn't aware your engagement had been announced." "It hasn't," she admitted. "Not formally." Dr. Harper nodded thoughtfully. "For what it's worth, I think you've chosen well. Ryder's one of the finest young men in these parts." He paused, though not everyone in town may share that opinion. With that cryptic remark, he departed, leaving Willow alone with the unconscious Preston and her growing suspicions about the accident that had nearly claimed his life. Hours passed as Willow maintained her vigil, occasionally bathing Preston's face with cool water or adjusting his blankets. As twilight fell, the door opened to admit Walter Edwards, his expression grave. "Miss Keating," he said, removing his hat. "I've just heard about your connection to my employee." Willow stiffened in her chair, but didn't rise. "Mr. Edwards, I came to inquire about his condition," Edwards continued, approaching the bed. "A terrible accident. The men said a snake spooked the herd." "How strange," Willow replied evenly. "I heard it was a person who caused the stampede." A flicker of something, surprise, concern, crossed Edward's face before his composed expression returned. "Well, confusion often surrounds such incidents. The important thing is that Ryder receives proper care, which I'm providing," Willow said pointedly. Edwards studied her, his calculating eyes taking in her protective posture at Preston's bedside. "So I see. I must say, this attachment seems to have developed with remarkable speed." "The heart knows what it wants, Mr. Edwards," Willow replied, borrowing Preston's sentiment from their meeting at the bridge. "Indeed." Edward's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And sometimes what it wants isn't what's best for it. You're still quite new to our community, Miss Keating. There's much you don't know about Ryder." "I know enough," she said firmly. Edward sighed theatrically. "I had hoped you might be more reasonable. The school board meets tomorrow evening to discuss the upcoming term. Your situation will undoubtedly be a topic of conversation." "Are you threatening my position again, Mr. Edwards?" Willow asked, anger overcoming her usual caution. "Merely stating facts," he replied smoothly. "A teacher who abandons her students midday to rush to a man's side, who spends the night unchaperoned in his company. These actions raise questions about judgment and moral character." "I had permission from a parent to leave the classroom," Willow countered. "And as Preston's fiancée, my place is at his side during his recovery." Edward's eyebrows rose. "Fiancée? How interesting. I don't recall seeing a notice in the town paper." "We haven't made a formal announcement yet," Willow admitted. "Convenient," Edwards observed dryly. "Well, I won't intrude further on your vigil. Good evening, Miss Keating." After he'd gone, Willow released a shaky breath, her hand finding Preston's and squeezing gently. "I won't let him hurt you again," she whispered fiercely, "or take away what you've worked so hard for." As if in response, Preston's fingers twitched within hers, and his eyelids fluttered. "Willow," he murmured, his voice weak but wonderfully, blessedly conscious. "I'm here," she assured him, tears of relief spilling onto their joined hands. "I'm right here." Preston's blue eyes, clouded with pain but alert, found hers. "The stampede. Don't worry about that now," she soothed. "You need to rest and heal." "No," he insisted weakly. "Need to tell you. Wasn't an accident. Saw someone deliberate." "Shoo." Willow stroked his hair. "I know. I suspect the same. But we'll deal with that when you're stronger." Preston's gaze held hers intently. "You're here," he observed, wonder in his voice. "At my side. Where else would I be?" she asked softly. A ghost of his usual smile touched his lips. "Does this mean?" "Yes," Willow whispered, bending to press a gentle kiss to his forehead. "My answer is yes, Preston Ryder. I'll marry you." As consciousness slipped from him again, the smile remained on Preston's face, a smile that told Willow she'd made the right choice, regardless of the challenges that still lay ahead. Outside the doctor's office, unseen in the gathering darkness, A figure watched through the window, witnessing their exchange with mounting anger. The stakes had just been raised, and Edwards was not a man accustomed to losing. Word spread quickly through Elkhorn Springs about the schoolteacher's bedside declaration. By morning, congratulations were arriving along with inquiries about Preston's condition and the wedding date. Willow accepted both with grace, though inwardly she worried about the school board meeting Edwards had mentioned. "You should go back to your students," Preston insisted when he woke more lucidly. "I'll be fine here. Dr. Harper says you can be moved to the schoolteacher's cottage this afternoon," Willow told him, adjusting his pillows. "It's closer to town than the ranch, and you'll need someone to look after you while you heal." Preston's eyebrows rose. "That's not exactly proper, Willow. Mrs. Jenkins has offered to stay as chaperone until the wedding," she explained with a smile. "The whole town is conspiring to help us, it seems." "Not the whole town," Preston reminded her grimly. "Edwards won't take this lying down." "Let me worry about Edwards," Willow said, more confidently than she felt. "You focus on getting better." That evening, as Mrs. Jenkins sat with Preston in the cottage's small parlor, Willow made her way to the town hall for the school board meeting. She dressed with special care in her most professional blue dress, her hair neatly pinned, determined to present herself as the competent, respectable teacher she was. The 5 members of the school board, including Walter Edwards as chairman, sat at a long table at the front of the room. A dozen townspeople occupied chairs facing them, curious about the unusually well-attended meeting. Edwards called for order, then proceeded through several routine matters before fixing his gaze on Willow. "Now, we must address a matter concerning our schoolteacher, Miss Keating." Willow rose, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Before you begin, Mr. Edwards, I'd like to make a statement." Edwards frowned at the interruption but nodded curtly. "Proceed." "Honored members of the board, citizens of Elkhorn Springs," Willow began, turning to address the room. "I understand there may be concerns about my recent conduct regarding Mr. Preston Ryder." Murmurs rippled through the audience, and Edwards shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I wish to clarify that Mr. Ryder and I are engaged to be married," Willow continued. "While our courtship has been brief, our commitment is sincere. I believe my conduct has been appropriate for a woman in my position, particularly given the emergency circumstances of Mr. Ryder's accident. An accident that conveniently occurred just as he was about to purchase his own land," Edwards interjected. "Land that would have made him independent of Sage Creek Ranch." Gasps and whispers followed this statement. Willow's eyes narrowed at Edwards' inadvertent confirmation of Preston's financial situation. Information a ranch owner might know, but that seemed oddly specific. "How fortunate that you're so well informed about Mr. Ryder's personal finances," she replied evenly. "Though I wonder how you came by that knowledge." Edward's face darkened. As his employer, you threatened to dismiss him if he continued seeing me," Willow interrupted, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent room. "Just as you threatened my position if I continued seeing him." The other board members exchanged alarmed glances. Mr. Peterson, the mercantile owner, leaned forward. "Is this true, Edwards?" Miss Keating misunderstood a friendly warning. Edwards blustered. "I merely expressed concern about her judgment and priorities, concerns that seem well-founded given her abandonment of her classroom duties to rush to Ryder's side." "With my explicit permission," came a voice from the back of the room. Mrs. Jenkins stood, her expression resolute. "I offered to watch the children myself, knowing how much Mr. Ryder means to both Miss Keating and to the students." Another voice joined in, Timothy Walsh's father, the blacksmith. "My boys learn more from Ryder's visits to the school than in the entire previous term. Man has a gift for teaching. And for saving lives," added a young ranch hand who stood near the door. "He pushed me clear of those stampeding cattle. Would have been trampled dead if not for him." Edward's face had grown increasingly red as more voices rose in Preston's defense. "This is beside the point," he snapped. "The issue is Miss Keating's fitness to continue as teacher given her impulsive attachment to a man of questionable character." "What's questionable about Preston Ryder's character?" challenged Dr. Harper, who had slipped in during the discussion. "In my experience, he's one of the most honorable men in this county. He refused to court my niece," Edwards blurted, then immediately looked as if he regretted the outburst. A shocked silence fell over the room, broken after a moment by Mr. Peterson's surprised laughter. "Is that what this is about, Edwards?" Wounded family pride. Edward's glare could have melted steel. "It speaks to his judgment. Charlotte is from a fine Boston family, educated, cultured, and not the woman he loves," Willow interjected quietly. "Is that such a crime?" The sympathetic murmurs from the audience suggested it was not. Edwards glanced around, clearly sensing the tide turning against him. "There's still the matter of the stampede," he said, changing tactics. "Ryder claims it was deliberately caused, an outrageous accusation that impugns the integrity of everyone at Sage Creek." "Not everyone," said the young ranch hand who had spoken earlier. "Just whoever scattered those rattlesnakes among the herd." He stepped forward, nervously twisting his hat in his hands. "I didn't say nothing before because I was scared of losing my job. But I saw Mr. Edwards' foreman, Jackson, carrying a sack toward the north pasture just before the stampede. When I asked what he was doing, he told me to mind my own business if I wanted to keep drawing wages." The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Edwards surged to his feet. "This is slander. You have no proof." "Actually," interrupted the town sheriff, who had been quietly observing from the back, "we found a sack with snake scales in it behind Jackson's quarters. He confessed about an hour ago, said you ordered him to cause a distraction that would remind Ryder of his place. Didn't mean for anyone to get hurt, he claims." All eyes turned to Edwards, whose face had drained of color. "This is absurd," he stammered. "Jackson is lying to save himself." "We'll let a judge determine that," the sheriff replied, approaching the table. "Walter Edwards, I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to cause bodily harm." As the sheriff led a protesting Edwards from the room, the remaining board members huddled in whispered conference. Finally, Mr. Peterson addressed Willow. "Miss Keating, the board sees no reason to question your position or conduct. In fact, we commend your dedication to both your students and your fiancé." He cleared his throat. "We would, however, appreciate it if you could provide a wedding date, simply for the record." Willow smiled, relief washing through her. "Mr. Ryder and I were thinking 2 weeks from Sunday, assuming his recovery progresses well." "Excellent," Mr. Peterson nodded. "And perhaps, given Mr. Ryder's apparent teaching abilities and popularity with the students, the board might consider offering him a position as your assistant once you're married. We've been discussing the need for expanded practical education for some time." Joy bubbled up within Willow at the unexpected offer. "I believe he would be very interested in such a position, Mr. Peterson." As the meeting adjourned, Willow hurried back to the cottage, eager to share the news with Preston. She found him propped up on the parlor sofa, his face lighting up at her entrance despite the pain evident in his movements. "Edwards has been arrested," she announced breathlessly, kneeling beside him to take his hands. "The stampede wasn't an accident. His foreman confessed to scattering rattlesnakes among the cattle on Edwards' orders." Preston's expression darkened. "I knew I saw someone. All because I wouldn't court his niece. And because you dared to want independence," Willow added. "But that doesn't matter now. The school board has cleared my name completely, and," she paused for dramatic effect, "they've offered you a position as my teaching assistant once we're married." Preston's eyes widened. "Teaching assistant? Me?" "Apparently, you've made quite an impression on the town's children and their parents," Willow said with a smile. "It would be a steady income while you develop your ranch." "Our ranch," Preston corrected gently, lifting a hand to cup her cheek. "Everything I have is yours now, Willow. Everything I am." Mrs. Jenkins tactfully excused herself to the kitchen, giving them a moment of privacy as Preston drew Willow closer for a tender kiss. 2 weeks from Sunday," Willow murmured against his lips. "That's when I told them we'd marry." Preston smiled, his blue eyes radiant with love and hope. "Not a moment too soon," he whispered, sealing their future with another kiss. 2 weeks later, the entire town of Elkhorn Springs gathered to witness the marriage of Miss Willow Keating to Mr. Preston Ryder. The schoolhouse had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbons, the students proudly serving as attendants and flower bearers for their beloved teacher and her gentle giant. Preston, still moving carefully due to his healing ribs but resplendent in a new suit, watched with wonder as Willow walked toward him on Mr. Peterson's arm. Her cream-colored dress, simpler than the fashionable Eastern styles but elegantly tailored to her slender form, made her appear to glow in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the schoolhouse windows. Her honey-blonde hair was adorned with the same blue columbines he had shown her on the ridge, woven into a crown that framed her radiant face. As they spoke their vows before the traveling minister, Preston's strong voice carried his promises to the back of the crowded room, while Willow's softer tones nonetheless rang with certainty and love. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," declared the minister, beaming at the young couple. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Ryder." Preston needed no further encouragement, gathering Willow gently in his arms and kissing her with a tenderness that brought sighs from the women and approving nods from the men in attendance. The celebration continued well into the evening, with tables set up in the schoolyard and music provided by local fiddle players. As twilight fell, Preston led Willow away from the festivities toward two saddled horses waiting nearby. "Where are we going?" she asked, accepting his help onto her mount despite the elaborate dress. "I have something to show you," he replied mysteriously, swinging carefully into his own saddle. They rode north out of town, Preston setting a gentle pace that wouldn't aggravate his injuries. After about 20 minutes, they crested a hill, and Preston reined his horse to a stop. Below them, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, lay 100 acres of rolling grassland bisected by a clear stream. At its center stood the frame of a small cabin, its foundation complete and walls beginning to rise. "Our land," Preston said softly, watching Willow's expression as she took in the sight. "And the beginnings of our home." Willow's eyes filled with tears of joy. "When did you? How did you?" "The bank approved the loan the day after Edwards was arrested," Preston explained. "And every able-bodied man in town has contributed a day's labor to help with the building. They wanted to surprise you. Surprise us both, really." "It's perfect," Willow whispered, reaching across the space between their horses to take his hand. "Everything I could have dreamed of." "There's something else," Preston said, his expression softening. "With Edwards gone, Sage Creek Ranch is being sold. Mr. Peterson and some of the other businessmen in town have formed a company to buy it. They've asked me to manage it for them." Willow gasped. "Preston, that's wonderful. It means we'll have a steady income while our own place develops," he continued. "Between that, the teaching position, and your schoolmistress salary will be more than comfortable." His smile turned sheepish. "And we might need the extra space sooner than we thought." "What do you mean?" Willow asked, though something in his expression made her heart skip. "Dr. Harper mentioned something when he was checking my ribs yesterday. Said he'd noticed certain signs when he examined you last week. For the wedding certificate, remember?" Preston's eyes held hers, filled with wonder and question. "He said most women don't realize for another month or two, but he's pretty certain." Willow's hand flew to her stomach, a mixture of shock and joy flooding through her. "A baby? Already?" Preston nodded, watching her carefully. Is it too soon? We've barely had time to know each other, let alone." "It's perfect," Willow interrupted, her face glowing with happiness. "Absolutely perfect." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across what would soon be their home, Preston carefully dismounted and helped Willow down from her horse. There, on the land that represented their future, the gentle giant cowboy took his teacher bride in his arms and kissed her with all the love and promise their new life held. Behind them, the town of Elkhorn Springs prepared for night, its lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Before them stretched their own land, and beyond that, a future filled with love, family, and the sweet certainty that they had found in each other exactly what they needed, a love born in a schoolroom and destined to last a lifetime. In the gathering dusk, as Preston and Willow sealed their future with another tender kiss, the first star appeared overhead, a silent witness to the beginning of their journey together, a journey that had started when a gentle giant cowboy had won a shy teacher's heart through her students, and in doing so, found his own heart's true home.